He's a silly person running for president.
I think,
Matt, you wrote an article essentially saying he could, we may have to, he could be decent.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think that Donald Trump isn't just silly. I think he's dangerous. And I think that Jeb Bush is boxed in because he signed that silly pledge that they all signed to support the Republican nominee. He needs to tear up that pledge. I think Donald Trump is potentially much more dangerous than Hillary Clinton because he's a complete wild card. We have no idea if he's a conservative or a liberal, where he stands.
More than any other candidate, Donald Trump shoots from the lip. But is there any issue that's really off limits? Back with me, I have Matt Lewis, Harry Inton, and Stuart Stevens. So let's tee it up with this, Matt. First, it was, you think of the topics that Trump has tackled. You have immigration, women, John McCain, now 9/11. And so he lobs these grenades, blows up the political conversation for days and days. He says, he's like, I set the agenda for political discussion. Doesn't he kind of have a point?
Yeah, he does. Absolutely. Look, I think it's amazing that you now have a situation where the leading candidate for the nomination of the Republican Party is attacking the last Republican president over an issue that is, I think, been essentially settled in the 2004 election, certainly, but amongst Republicans. You may question George W. Bush on the Iraq War, but on 9/11, that seems to be a settled issue. And I think this speaks to some larger things that Trump has going for him, some weird trends that are happening out there. There's this celebritization of politics he's benefiting from. There's what I call the death of experience. It no longer helps you. It actually hurts you to have experience. And I think the other thing is the decline of institutions. And you have the Republican Party, this brand, this institution that really is now coming under attack by the presumptive nominee.
Stuart, I want you to respond to the brand issue with Republicans right now.
Oh, listen, I think this is utter madness of Donald Trump. Two people ran for president in 2000, Al Gore and George Bush. So I think Donald Trump basically is playing for those Republicans that wish that Al Gore had been president on 9/11. I think that's a pretty small group of people. I think Trump just keeps throwing these things out. I think ultimately, at a certain point, people become tired of it. Custer was looking for the Indians too. At a certain point, when you have this path, it's not one that leads necessarily to glory.
But he is throwing these things out, and a lot of these things, these attacks, are specifically against Jeb Bush. Harry, you say he has definitely gotten inside of Jeb Bush's head.
Jeb Bush was supposed to run a joyful campaign. I have to be honest, my father's funeral a month ago was more joyful than this campaign has been. I mean, he has just gotten thrown off his campaign. He is going after Jeb Bush. He isn't staying in his lane. Look at Marco Rubio, who has a nice, steady, straight line. He's moving up in the polls. Compare that to Bush, who's been falling down, who even in his own home state of Florida is fourth to Donald Trump. Fourth.
I want everyone to take a listen. We've just turned some sound around from Jeb Bush just appearing on Hannity tonight. Listen to this.
Who would you rather have with their finger on the button, Obama, Trump, or Hillary? Or do all three scare you?
No, look, I'd rather have the Republican nominee. That's who I'd rather have. I'm a loyal Republican. I've been that way for a long while.
I mean, if he were to have a chance to take a direct shot at Trump, and he didn't take it just then. Matt, does he need to full-on assault?
I think he needs to. I think he was the front runner. In many ways, people see him as a front runner because he is a Bush and because he raised all that money. I think he needs to take on Trump now. And look, the way to take on Donald Trump, I think, is to go directly to the ridiculousness of the Donald Trump candidacy.
How do you mean? Be specific.
He's a ridiculous candidate for president. Well, he's someone who says that he watches. Knows about foreign policy because he watches shows. He's just an absurd candidate. He's out here questioning the Republican nominee, the Republican president on 9/11. It's just then he sort of doesn't want to talk about it. He's a silly person running for president.
I think Matt, you wrote an article essentially saying we may have to he could be decent.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think that Donald Trump isn't just silly. I think he's dangerous. And I think that Jeb Bush is boxed in because he signed that silly pledge that they all signed to support the Republican nominee. He needs to tear up that pledge. I think Donald Trump is potentially much more dangerous than Hillary Clinton because he's a complete wild card. We have no idea if he's a conservative or a liberal, where he stands. And I think this is like, remember that time when Tim Pawlenty he was sort of bad-mouthing Mitt Romney on Fox News Sunday, and then they get to the debate and he won't do it. I think Jeb Bush should have lowered the boom on Donald Trump there, and the fact that he won't do it is self-selective.
That was the issue with the last debate when Trump brought up Columba, and a lot of people said he should have gone farther, and he didn't.
But maybe that's a self-selective thing. Maybe if you're not going to stand up to him, you don't deserve to be president.
Harry, 7 months ago, you wrote an article about Ted Cruz saying he's too extreme and too disliked to win. Your last line went something like, in campaigns since 1980, no candidate hated by the establishment has actually won. But you're not walking that back.
I mean, look, if Donald Trump can rise in the polls and Ben Carson can rise in the polls, why not Ted Cruz?
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.